Beaches have always terrified me. Well, not always. My fear is a direct result of what I'm about to tell you. As a kid, I used to love the shore, and remember spending many summers eagerly awaiting the weekend when my family and I would hang out at our beach house. Or, if I was lucky, they'd let me spend it at my friend Charles's beach house, which was even more fun. I was 16, and this was one of those special summer weekends. Me, Charles, and our friend Riley were going to spend a few unsupervised days at Charles's beach house in LBI. Riley was a year older than Charles and me, and had recently gotten his license, so we'd be driving down in his car. The drive was fantastic. Riley was a pretty uncoordinated driver at the time, so most of the ride was spent laughing at him, swerving and cursing the road. We got down to LBI in good time, and immediately moved our stuff from the car to the rooms we'd be staying in. The layout of the house matters to the story. A front door, a garage door connecting the back to the front yard, a back sliding door, a back upstairs deck that connects the upstairs bedrooms, and a spiral staircase from the back deck to the ground, so you can enter and exit the house from upstairs. The house sits along a lagoon, meaning the back faces a narrow channel of water, with houses on the opposite side. We were at that ripe age where chasing girls was a priority, and a nice beach house all to ourselves was the perfect occasion. We spent a few hours figuring out which girls were down the shore and messaged them on Snapchat until we found a group of 3 cute girls who said they'd come kick back at Charles's house. I had more than enough weed to last us the weekend, and we'd snagged a few bottles of our parents' alcohol before leaving, so things felt perfect. The 3 girls, Rosie, Alexa, and Sophie, were fun and flirty, and the 3 of us could tell where the night might end up. At one point, the 6 of us decided to smoke in Charles's backyard pool. It was small but perfect for 6 drunk kids. I remember the sight vividly. The gentle bay breeze in my hair, steam from the heated water rising slowly with puffs of smoke from the joints. At our age, this was bliss. Then suddenly Charles turned the music down and stared over my shoulder into the darkness of the lagoon. Confused, I turned around and could roughly make out the houses on the other side, but I wasn't sure what he was looking at. One of the girls asked why he had turned the music down, and he whispered that he saw someone standing on the opposite dock. I figured he was messing with us and started laughing. "Who cares, bro? People literally live here," I said. Charles shook his head and whispered that he knew that family personally, and his parents said they were in Florida for the week. I still thought it wasn't a big deal, or he was joking, so I kept chuckling, though the girls were a little freaked and said they wanted to go inside. We started drying off in the yard when Riley jumped and cursed, looking toward the lagoon. The rest of us turned, and, even though the light was dim, I could see movement from the opposite dock. A passing car on the road across from us briefly lit the scene, and the sight was horrifying. 4 tall silhouettes standing at the edge of the dock facing us. It was impossible to tell what they were wearing or what they looked like, but they were clearly looking our way. "Go inside now," Charles said shakily, motioning us toward the sliding door. As we rushed inside, I heard a distinct sound that remains the most terrifying noise I've ever heard. 4 consecutive splashes from behind us. Those guys were swimming across the lagoon. We went into full panic mode. The girls screamed, while Riley slammed the sliding door shut and locked it. Charles ran to the front to lock that door too, and the 6 of us ran to a room not visible from outside. We waited in silence, horrified at what we might hear next. A few minutes passed in tense quiet, then Riley cursed and revealed he'd forgotten to lock the sliding door on the deck. Charles started to panic, knowing the house was about to be broken into. Soft, quieted footsteps above us were the last straw. None of us had any weapons, and we were all intoxicated, so running was our only real option. The 6 of us sprinted for the front door and bolted to the car, which Riley started in a flash, though the chaos got the better of him, and he destroyed Charles's mailbox on the way out of the driveway. Once we were far enough away, we called the police. The ordeal was a nightmare. We went back after the police searched the house, and the news was shattering. All the valuables on the top floor were missing, and worse, Charles's family had owned a medium-sized Boston Werbo that was also stolen, most likely used as the getaway vehicle. Charles's father kept a spare set of keys in a small hatch below the steering wheel, which the police concluded was how the culprits got away so quickly. How they knew where the key was hidden is something I still wonder. The police were never able to arrest the perpetrators and likely never will. Charles, Riley. And I think whoever robbed the house might have known the family and that the house was supposed to be vacant that weekend. It's been a long time since this chilling event, but I haven't let a day pass without locking every door and window in my home. Do yourself a favor and lock your doors at night. I never thought I'd be revisiting this, but I actually have an update relevant to the story I sent a while back. It's not exactly my story, but I'll do my best to tell it. Before I get into it, here's a quick recap. When I was 16, I spent a weekend at Charles's beach house in LBI with Riley and some girls. Noticed people standing across the lagoon, who then swam over and later broke in, stealing the boat as their getaway. And as far as I knew, the authorities never found the boat or caught the thieves. Admittedly, Charles and I fell out of touch after college and moving to different cities, so I wasn't getting constant updates. But I recently caught up with Charles at a high school reunion we both coincidentally attended. I wasn't even planning on going, but my girlfriend convinced me it might be fun to see how everyone turned out, so I figured, what the hell? I was flying solo, which is never fun, but the moment I stepped into the venue, I was pleasantly surprised to see that Charles was already there, talking to Riley and a few other guys from our friend group. It was a kind of cool but surreal moment all at the same time. Seeing people you haven't spoken to in years who looked exactly the same but completely different. I walked over and joined the circle, and it was actually really nice catching up. As the night went on, people started breaking off into smaller groups. Charles pulled Riley and me to the side and asked if we wanted to grab a drink at some random bar after things wrapped up. Riley couldn't, for whatever reason. I think he had an early flight the next morning, but I was definitely game. So we ended up at this little dive bar, just reminiscing about old times over a few beers. And I can't exactly remember how, but that night at his beach house floated into the conversation. As soon as it did, Charles slapped the table like he suddenly remembered something he hadn't been thinking about. I should mention I actually wrote some of this down in my notes app so I could tell the story as accurately as possible, or at least as accurately as Charles told me, because what he said next was pretty wild. He explained that his little brother, Kieran, is 19 now, and apparently he and his friends are way bigger troublemakers than we were back in the day. About a year ago, Kieran and two of his friends, without asking permission, decided to take the family's new boat out. This was their replacement boat, the one they got after the insurance payout from the stolen one, for what was supposed to be a late afternoon trip with a bunch of beer that they were going to drink while out on the water, which is obviously incredibly stupid and dangerous, not to mention illegal since they're all underage. But it gets worse. Feeling adventurous, they decided to anchor near Coral Island, which I later looked up and found out is technically part of the Forsyth Wildlife Refuge, and you're not supposed to be there at night. Their plan was to anchor as closely as they could safely get, kill the bears, then swim to shore and hang out on the island to watch the stars, or whatever. They swam to shore and found a nice spot and were just sitting there waiting for the sun to go down when one of Kieran's friends noticed another boat they hadn't seen before, anchored further down the shore. Kieran took a closer look and, according to Charles, became convinced it looked exactly like their family's old Boston Werbo, the one that got stolen. Keep in mind, the boat was pretty far away and it was getting dark, so I had a hard time believing his brother could be sure about it. But Kieran wouldn't entertain the possibility that it was some random boat. He convinced his friends to swim out with him to get a better look, and that's exactly what they did. By the time they reached it, Kieran was 100% convinced it was his family's old boat. Here's where it gets frustrating. Kieran wanted to take pictures to show his parents, but they hadn't brought their phones when they swam over. And by the time they would have swum back to their boat to get them, it would have been too dark to see anything clearly. One of Kieran's friends suggested calling the police, but Kieran and the other friend were terrified of getting in trouble. They'd been drinking, taken the boat without permission, and likely weren't supposed to be at the island in the first place, so calling the cops was the last thing he wanted to do. Instead, they decided to swim back to their boat, drive it over to the other boat for photos, then figure out what to do once they got home. They swam back to the shore to cut out some of the swim, and as they were walking down the beach, one of Kieran's friends turned around and noticed a man walking toward them. Charles said Kieran was positive the man picked up speed as soon as they turned around, like he was pursuing them. And according to Kieran, the person appeared to be holding a shovel, which was the scariest part. The boys ran, and the guy started running after them. They ran as fast as they could back to their boat, and Kieran looked back one more time to see the guy now running in the opposite direction, presumably back to his boat, which was significantly closer. The boys reached their boat and started leaving. But when you're operating a boat after sunset in New Jersey, there are regulations about speed and required lights, so they couldn't just gun it out of there. They had to follow speed limits, which I can imagine made the whole thing even more nerve-wracking and meant no detour to check out the other boat. Charles said Kieran described the ride back as the most tense thing he'd ever experienced. And I believe it. Someone could be following you in the dark without being able to speed away. Kieran said he wasn't sure whether they were followed, but he thought he heard faint sounds of a boat somewhere in the darkness behind them. Once they made it home, Kieran's friends again pushed him to call the police, but he still refused, saying he was more scared of his parents finding out what they had done than he was of whatever they'd seen on the island. The guilt ate him alive, though, and he came clean to his parents the next day, all except the drinking detail, which Charles only found out because Kieran told him later. Charles said his parents were more furious at Kieran than he remembers them ever being at him, which is saying a lot. His dad banned Kieran from using the house for the rest of the summer, among many other punishments. His parents ended up reporting what Kieran saw to the authorities, but Charles said nothing ever came of it. Just like with our original incident, the police were all but useless. At that point, I had to interrupt Charles with a few questions, like how could the boat still be in use around LBI all these years later without anyone recognizing it, and why someone would anchor so close to shore if it was really stolen. Charles admitted he didn't have solid answers. His best guess was whoever stole it might have stripped or repainted it enough to avoid suspicion. It's not like every boat owner has registration numbers memorized, and as for why they'd anchor so close to shore, maybe they felt comfortable because it was a restricted area where most people wouldn't go. My biggest questions were about the guy with a shovel. Charles just shrugged when I asked, suggesting maybe he was burying something or digging something up. But either way, it spooked Kieran and his friends enough that they confessed to something Kieran would normally never tell his parents about. And that was pretty much it. Charles and I talked a little while longer, and then it came time to leave, so we said our goodbyes. I still have no idea what to make of most of this, and hearing the story definitely didn't give me any closure. If anything, it opened up a whole nother can of worms that will most likely be left unresolved. Asterisk.